what was that like for you? Kind of being able to balance the good kid your parents know you to be versus like the kid you had to be in the street.
Well, I'm gonna tell you like this. I'm a Gemini,
Hmm.
so
Oh, so that
so
was
I
so you compartmentalized that easy.
yeah, that's something I learned. I had to learn at a young age, at an early age, because you know, my parents splitting, right? So now I'm to myself a lot. And so one thing I realized is that imagination is a powerful thing. And so sometimes you have to create certain characters to get through certain moments in life, right?
A welcome to the State of the Black Man's Mental Health Podcast, and I'm your host Paige Benjamin. And today we have an amazing guest. And today is going to be talking about healthy habits, things that you can do to kind of avoid getting yourself into situations and doing things that may either be detrimental to yourself, detrimental to your health, and those around you. I have an amazing guest today. Getting to know this young man, we have a lot in common. As y'all can see, portions of that flag underneath behind me right now, the Haitian flag that is, First Republic, First Black Republic to be exact. Now, I'm gonna introduce this young man. Actually, I'm gonna have him introduce you. Good brother, can you tell the people who you are and where you from?
My name is Solomon Alexandre, and I'm artistically known as Sunye Locksmith, and I'm also a martial art instructor. And so my students, they call me Sifu Songler. And I'm from Orlando, Florida, and I currently reside in Jacksonville, Florida.
So, a Florida boy, down south boy.
Yeah, all the way.
Oh man, so let's kind of take it back a little bit because to get where we're gonna go, I would like to kind of build the picture of where we come from, right? So first things first, Haiti, first Black Republic. I believe we're both first generation Haitian Americans, right?
Right.
What was growing up Haitian American, especially in Florida? Like for me, I thought Florida had it easy because Haitians is everywhere. I grew up in Brooklyn, which is kind of similar, right? Haitians everywhere, but we were still outnumbered to an extent. So tell me about your upcoming in Florida as a Haitian boy.
Man, you have to have that thick skin. You have to adapt real quick for one. You have to learn how to have thick skin for two. And sometimes you have to be ready to fight for three.
Hmm.
Um, there were days where I'll go home sad because of like the bullying and stuff like that. Um, Being attacked, saying that you eat cat, you know, all types of crazy stuff. Um, you always felt like you were the point of a joke or attack at
Hmm.
times.
Hmm.
You know, but the beautiful thing about that is like when you find people that's like minded like you and people that come from a safe place like you, and you learn that unity is strength.
Right.
Okay, and there's power in unity, and that's what got me through those moments. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying? It got me over those moments.
So now, growing up Haitian, wasn't the easiest, right? Because I think there are, and once again, are you familiar from where your parents are from?
Yeah, yeah. So my father's from Gonaive,
Okay,
and my mom's from Port-au-Prince.
okay. My dad is from Akaya and my mom's from Latibonite. So we
Okay,
go
so that,
north
that
and then north. Yep,
yeah.
yep.
So my grandma used to live in Akai.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, nice, nice. Now, let's fast forward. We grow up, and you sound like, or it sounds like you got into some trouble growing up, right? Um, in order to fend for yourself, you either gotta show up or show out, or was it what they say on Beanie Siegel, Get Down or Lay Down, right?
Yeah,
And it's one of those things where Florida is known for its rough and tough environment. And
and
if
and
you,
racism too.
that part, right? And if you aren't strong enough, or if you can't stand on your own, you kind of find yourself in either being bullied and remaining bullied, or you turn that leaf and you just handing out fish sandwiches and stuff like that. What was that like for you? What was that like for you, kind of being able to balance the good kid your parents know you to be versus like the kid you had to be in the street?
Well, I'm gonna tell you like this. I'm a Gemini,
Hmm.
so
Oh, so that
so
was,
I
so you compartmentalized that easy.
yeah, that's something I learned. I had to learn at a young age, at an early age, because you know, my parents splitting, right? So now I'm to myself a lot. And so one thing I realized is that imagination is a powerful thing. And so sometimes you have to create certain characters to get through certain moments in life,
Hmm.
right? And so, like, my inspiration of, standing up for myself or finding the courage, I got that from like watching, animation, animes, cartoons and stuff. Um, and sometimes, like, you tend to find an older person in the family who can help, instill that confidence. So, that what really helped me, having an older cousin,
Mm.
right? Give me that introduction to. He's like, telling me to stand up for myself. Like I don't have to accept certain things,
Right, right.
like and like it's okay to fight back. And for me, I think it was just natural for me to fight back because of my last name, Alexandre,
Mm.
and and that's in Greek, it's Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
And the meaning behind that is warrior, defender of man. So for me, it was
Mm.
just natural, you know, for me to, defend myself.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, I would get in trouble because, in school you're gonna get in trouble when you defend yourself.
Right, right. Okay. So now you talking about school, defending yourself. Like, what kind of student were you? Were you one of those that, you were the nerd like me sometimes, or you were the like in between, still trying to figure yourself out? Because I think for me, it wasn't until about high school that I kind of defined myself to an extent. Because like, if we're talking about grown up Haitian, so I moved from New York to Philadelphia in '97. So that's at that cusp of the like tail end of the Fugees coming in, making things pop, and everybody's wanting to be Haitian and trying to be Haitian to, '97 for me changing and shifting to another city. I had to kind of, I was given the opportunity to reinvent myself to an extent, right? Um, Philadelphia wasn't necessarily as um, divisive in culture as New York was. And so for me, it was easy for me to be like, all right, I'm Paige. Um, this is who I am. And there was no questioning or bullying me about my heritage. A lot of the times, I necessarily didn't have to kind of explain any of that. People just, nobody really asked. So, what was that like for you? Because let's touch on the story, because I believe you also shifted places you live from, I believe, Orlando to Kissimmee, right?
Yeah. So like for me, um, as I told you, right? So I stopped seeing my father around the age of 8, and this is where I start like getting in trouble, not having that male discipline, that male structure. Um, and so now I'm starting, being in the city. You only have you being in the city. You have to adapt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to adapt to your environment. And by you adapting to your environment, you tend to be around things that you shouldn't be around, and you tend to see things that you shouldn't see, right? And so that was like the direction I was going into. And so my mom work all day on Saturday. I'm the only child. I'm gonna stay in the house from 9 to 12, 9 to 1. When 1 o'clock come, I'm out. Like I'm hanging with friends. Um, I'm at their house, running the streets or whatever. And then I start, gambling, start to, hustle in the sixth grade, start getting in fights, start to being disruptive in class. And I think for me, it was more of a not having that structure in my life, that male influence that I once knew. And it was like every time, my mom would put me around like an uncle or a cousin, she would like pull me away from them. And I guess,
Mm,
she probably seen something that I don't need to be
doing.
around, right?
Right,
Certain
right,
certain flaws. And it's like, as an adult, I see that now.
right, right.
And it makes
And to that point, like, from having your dad around all the time, he's creating structure, and under the umbrella of habits, he's creating some standards that you need to be abiding by. And once he comes out the picture, those standards are somewhat not reinforced as much, right? Um,
right.
and so now you're looking at, all right, so I see these cousins doing these things, I see these uncles doing these things, and your mom is also realizing, like, yeah, my business want like, yo, and just so y'all know, I'm gonna switch up this Creole and English for y'all. So if you don't know, just read the subtitles. Um, um, yo, your mom was like, ah, mbabe got some na fe vagabond sayo, so but like, because sometimes it's necessary, right? Like I realized when I don't think I was a bad kid. I was just curious, right? I would do things and get in trouble for just not listening, and that was it. But like it sounds like for you, your mom was doing her best to um kind of keep the right things and people around you, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, no, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So, yeah. But it helped, but it didn't because of
Mm.
the inconsistencies.
Yep, yep.
And so now, when you asked me how I was as a student,
Mm-hmm.
I did my work. I was studious, but also I had trouble learning. I was
Mm.
dyslexic. I said
Dyslexic.
dyslexic, dyslexic,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I was in speech classes. I had a speech impediment. Um, I was in ESOL. I had the accent. I'm mad that I lost my accent. You
Li-
know,
Listen,
but
listen. When you call places now, they're not gonna be like, "Oh man, he's a foreigner." They're gonna be like, "Where's this guy from?" You know what I mean?
yeah,
I mean,
you know,
I mean, to the point about the accent, right? It's interesting because if you were to hear me over the phone, you wouldn't be like, "This guy's Haitian," right?
right.
And on top of that, the name Paige is like, all right, is it Paige or
Very
Paige?
different.
Like it's different. So,
Yeah.
um, I definitely understand where you're coming from because when I go to Haiti, I get cracked on all the time by my cousins. They
Yep.
was
Me
like, "Yeah,
too.
you're not from around here." I was like, "What you talking?" He's like, "I can hear that accent." Look like "Lang na si tellement loum katando juste en bas." I'm like, "Damn, bro!" Like, I was like,
Hey, hey,
it's
that's funny.
crazy, bro.
Hey, the first time I went to Haiti, uh, when I went with the bros,
Mm-hmm.
it was like I forgot where we was at. I think we was doing some community service,
Mm-hmm.
and we was at like a foster care house or
Mm-hmm.
something, school, and the kids was like, "Son blanc where we." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, I'm like, I'm like, Keyshawn. They was like, "We about fat fly."
Yep, yep.
So,
As
and
a
I was like,
diaspora.
yeah, I was like, dang. I was like, oh well, But yeah, but me as a student, it was very hard. Like my mom, because my mom had like a a middle school education, and my father wasn't involved to help me with school, and so I didn't have nobody at home, and so like my cousins would help me, or sometimes they'll just do my homework, but
Mm,
it had got to a point where it's like, okay, I'm gonna have to learn, and so my mother, she would like make me read like the Bible, at night, and I think that just helped me, give me the confidence I need, to read on my own. And, I had got the extra help in
mm-hmm.
school. And not only that, I learned that if so I want to get something, I gotta learn how to read.
Yep,
You
yep.
know, if I want to play certain video games, I gotta, be able to comprehend.
Right. Right.
um, certain words or whatever. And then what really inspired me to read more was like Muhammad Ali.
Mm.
So like the way he like, his poetry and stuff like that. And when I used to watch him on TV, it's like, I love boxing, but I love the way he used to, speak and how
Mm-hmm.
confident he was. And that what made me confident,
Mm.
like when I used to see Muhammad Ali speak, or when I used to see like The Rock speak and articulate his words and stuff. And it just, I was like, okay. And so I would like, act like them. And, in middle school, we had this class called free writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can write whatever you want. And whatever you wrote, you can get up in front of the class and, read it out loud and, um, articulate it, act it out. And that in itself gave me the confidence I need to, to express myself, you know. And from there, because I was able, like you said, you was able to like reinvent yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And, and so when I moved to Kissimmee, I, I tried to bring Orlando with me. And so I was
Mm.
hustling, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and, I, and so I brought, the guys, and so I
Mm-hmm.
introduced the flip game to them in the wall
Mm.
because they didn't know about that. And so all of a sudden, I created this whole new culture or whatever of the gambling. And then one time, I was trying to play flips with this Haitian kid I knew, and it was his friends. And so me and the Haitian kid, our mothers knew each other, and so we used to go to church with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was with his homeboys, and so we trying to play flips. So we all in a circle, and he was like, "Nah, that's my coin. That's me." And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, I see what's going on. I was like, it's yours. And so that like they was about to jump me, but
Mm.
because I wasn't like being arrogant and stuff like that, and I was able, to, pick up real quick. I was like, nah, y'all boys got it. And so I left, and it was at that moment I said, you know what, I'm not gonna gamble no more
Mm.
because I see what it was doing to the school
Right, right, right.
and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
I mean, not even just that. It's you once again, this is an example of a bad habit, right? Like gambling,
Yep.
flipping, just hustling. And, these are things that if you're not paying attention to the signs, they start to lead you down a path that sometimes is no return. You know what I mean? And you're talking about at this point, was it middle school or high school?
I was in middle school, sixth grade.
Right. So, that's that range where it was like, all right, he's either gonna go to high school or he's going to jail. Let's try to figure where this is at. And it's great that you were able to identify this change for yourself and it didn't require such drastic measures for you to start to flip the script. Now, I do want to kind of move things along further. Um, you get to high school and are you playing football at this time in high school or you're like still figuring yourself out in high school?
So now, so like by the time I get to high school, like I started playing like flag football in middle school and wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So when I get to high school, now I convinced my mother to let me play tackle football,
How
and so
how
that
do
and
you
it,
do that? Because I mean, I was a very tiny kid, and trying to convince my mom to like let me wrestle, that was like the most difficult in the world. Because she was like, "Ah, usted mon petit yap kase bois, yap kase pio." Like, how'd you get past that? Because once again, this is you giving these young kids game to let them,
yeah,
they parents let them play
well,
ball.
I'm gonna tell you like this: that whole experience was traumatic.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Because so now I don't have that masculine figure in my life. I'm attracted to like you know sports like wrestling, boxing. I like, physical like contact
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And like my mom hated it. Like my mom did not like American football. She was like, at my 13, when I turned 13, I had like a football cape. And she said, "Oh, my dead body, you gonna play football?"
What?
You know what I'm saying? Like, and so like, I was playing flag football in middle school and she was okay with that, you
Mm.
know. But I convinced her to let me do wrestling, and you know, I was shocked,
Mm.
and then I realized, okay, maybe I can keep, pushing the envelope. And I was finally able to push the envelope. And because honestly, man, if I ain't have football and wrestling, oh, I was gonna run the streets wild.
Mm. So these are new habits, right? So these are new
Yes,
things that allow to kind of, because what ends up happening, and I was talking to my nephew in another episode, and he was like, coaches are kind of part of your extended family, right?
yes.
When you're talking about coaches and what they mean in your life, they're like the uncles that come around and make sure you're doing what you need to do, right?
Yes.
And so, what was that like? Because like you're talking about, so let's kind of take a couple of steps back to wrestling. What was that like? Because going into wrestling from somebody that hasn't done it before, and then there's some point or another where your mom either has to meet the coaches or deal with the school. Or she just never dealt with any of that part.
She never dealt with any of that part. She signed the paper or whatever. So like for me, one of my coaches was actually a Haitian. His name was
Mm,
Coach Francois and
mm,
stuff. He was, a real cool dude. And then that's how I ended up playing football because he also coached football.
got you.
So wrestling was what I needed in my life at that moment. Something to create structure, something to give me discipline, and a goal to obtain to reach.
Right.
And not only that, I was learning a skill,
Mm-hmm.
and I was learning how to defend myself, right? And not only that, I had to learn, you know, I had to hold myself accountable, and I had to learn how to take ownership, And what I mean by that is that I had to, yes, I was working out, when I did wrestling at school, but then when I go home, I gotta do my push ups, I gotta do my body squats, I gotta do my abs and stuff. So it gave me a sense of okay, work ethic. That's the
Right.
key word I'm looking
Right.
for. It gave
Right.
me it gave me a sense of work ethic. And the beauty is during that time too, I'm I'm drawing.
Got you.
You-
Got
And,
you.
and so one thing I'm learning is physical things, right? Like martial arts and art, in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
have similar principles,
Right.
And I didn't see that until I became an adult. So
Okay.
yeah, wrestling gave me the structure I needed. Um,
So now,
and
so let's I just want to kind of like start to build on the healthy habits, right? So we have martial arts, we have wrestling that's started to kind of give you a baseline of discipline at school, discipline at home,
self confidence.
self confidence, building up strength, right? And then you move on to football, which kind of does that times 10 to an extent, right? Now, what was football like for you? Because some people go into playing sports and thinking, I'm going to end up in the NFL. What was that mindset like for you going into sport? Was it just another thing to do to kind of stay out of trouble?
At first, I had dreams of going to college, playing football, and playing in the NFL. But also it was a time where I get a chance to be with my friends, be social. Because you gotta understand this, I was only the only child,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it was good to to be seen, be heard, and be thought of, not just from my parents, but
Right.
from people outside my family. And so football, in a sense, was it was essential to my life. Um, it gave me a sense of pride. Also, it showed me how to work with others,
Mm-hmm.
right? And also how to be studious when it comes to your craft and be a student of the game. But when there was no football, you know, I'm just like any other black kid in
Back to the
America
regular,
with no
back to the
guidance.
regular. I got you. I got you.
You
Now,
know,
offline, we talked about your journey to college, right? So you quickly touched on football was the gateway to college or the gateway to just getting out, right? Um, you get to college, or you choose a college and you choose an HBCU. Out of all the schools in Florida, what made you? And once again, this could have been a personal choice or just this was the only option that I had. So I'm just kind of get your perspective, like as an HBCU, what made you choose an HBCU over the plethora of schools around you, especially in that area?
Um, for me, I didn't know I was going to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a last minute thing. Like I stated earlier, my mom gave me two options. I go to school, I have to worry about no bills, or if I stay home, I'm going to give me a job, contribute to the household. My other option was to, go to the Marines, but I thought to myself that I'm my mother's only child, so I'm just going to give college a shot. And I only threw up one shot, and that shot was Bethune-Cookman University.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I almost got kicked out my freshman year.
Listen, I think we've all had some freshman stories that we
Yeah,
might not want to tell.
right. And so, but guess who gave me a chance?
Hmm.
The Bruhs.
Mm.
And so, that's nothing. Sometimes in life, nothing is like a coincidence.
Right, right, right. And and I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that, right? So you make it to Bethune as kind of your Hail Mary, right? It was like, sheesh, it was either school, military, or work. And you get to Bethune Cookman, and of course, the best fraternity in the world, the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. We got brothers everywhere, especially in high schools, right? So when we was talking offline, you had mentioned that I think every bruh has a story of how they realized after the fact that someone in their high school was a bruh, whether it was the coach, whether it was a teacher, whether it was something, and that experience you don't realize till you become the bros and you're like, oh, that's what he was talking about. So now, like, tell me about the bros, like, and when I say the bros, the brothers of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity, for those of you just tuning in, like, what about that organization made you say, all right, this is another healthy choice I want to make for myself? Because if we're looking at the course of your childhood, there's been a series of choices made for you, right? And then there's a series of choices that you've made, whether they be good or bad or indifferent. And then it looks like as you became more of a young man or a young adult, you started to kind of find the things that got you less in trouble, right? And now I'm not gonna say Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated got you in trouble or didn't get you in trouble, but what made you pick this organization of all on campus?
Their values and their beliefs,
Mm,
for one. When I see, from the outside looking in, I'm like, man, these guys tight. And what made me come to that conclusion was at homecoming.
mm,
My first homecoming experience where they were like surrounding the tree, right?
mm.
And they were like marching and just how they fellowship with each other. And I was like, wow, it pulled me in. I was like, this is different. It's different from the organizations,
Mm-hmm.
because it was just like, when the bruh show up, the bruhs go to other people homecoming.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Yep.
Like no other else. Like that in itself, I was like, man, I was like, wow. But not
Okay.
only that, just how the bruhs treat people that's outside the fraternity too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what made me like, okay, it showed me their character.
Mm.
They doing the drives, they doing the voters registration. They on the front line.
Okay. Okay. Now you decide to be the breast. How did that change your life any? Because you know what a lot of people don't realize, and for the uninitiated, there's this idea that fraternities and sororities are just these social organizations that just don't do anything. Where in fact they're a business, right? It's on the college campus. they're seen as a club, lack of a better term, but this organization has, officers, we have projects that we have to run, we have all of these things now. What was that like for you? And then we talked about going to, conferences and stuff like that. So what was that like for you, as a young man, like experiencing this for the first time? Because once again, outside of Orlando, Kissimmee, now you're in Bethune, it's like it's a different world. And was it a culture shock?
It was absolutely a culture shock. Cause like, you know, you enter the organization not knowing what to expect, right? And you're on the outside looking in. And
Mm-hmm.
so you just think about, okay, they just marching, they do a little community service here, but no, it's it's like project management. you know, being, you know what I mean? Like you
Right.
got to create events. You gotta you gotta know how to delegate things. You gotta know how to talk to people. You gotta know
Mm-hmm.
how to influence people, right?
Right.
Sway people. Um, and the breast be looking out, man. I remember when we went to the undergrad summit, like we rode the University of Florida, shout out to OZ. We hopped in the car with them, in the van, and we had no place to stay.
Mm.
And no brothers let us stay in their hotel.
Mm.
And then our advisor gave us, looked out the remaining, weekend. And the older brothers knew that we were in undergrad, and they paid for our our lunch, our dinner. Um, you know, they made sure we were okay.
Mm-hmm.
They made sure we had gas money, and it was just always you felt it's like for the first time as a young black man, you know, you felt like other men care about you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you don't. It was like the first time I didn't really feel alone.
Mm. That's
You know
deep.
what I'm saying? So because it was like I was the only child, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my father was in and out my life, and then I didn't see him, but I saw my father again at the age of 14 or 15.
Mm.
So then it was like it was like the inconsistencies from him, and then I joined the brush, and now I see this whole new, I get this whole new experience. But then I realized that I must make it. I must make the experience. I can't. The experience. It's not gonna be given to me.
Right.
I must
Right.
seek it, and I
Right.
must make the best out of it, and I must manage it too.
So it sounds like there's a theme here, right? So as you're coming up, you're realizing some things need to change in your life. Ha- are there any external influences that's been leading you to being like, yo, I might need to stop? Like, I know with the gambling, it was like, all right, something was about to happen to me that was not gonna be favorable, but everything else was. Were there like people around you that was kind of giving you advice? Because I know you mentioned this is kind of like the second time your dad wasn't around, but did you have influences coming up that kind of helped you stay on a straight and narrow, or you just at some point or another like I gotta just change just for change's sake?
I mean, it's a little bit of both. Like I still have male figures in my life, like my godfather, my uncle, and someone else who's like a father figure to me, um, and my older cousin and stuff. But they can only teach me so much.
Right,
They didn't go to college.
right,
You know what I'm
right.
saying? So they didn't have to deal with these things. So sometimes it was me where I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to change this, let go of this habit, or I'm gonna have to hold myself more accountable here. Or and also too, my mom is still a influence in my life too. And one thing my mom told me was like, I had to learn how to control my anger,
Mm,
or it's gonna be the end of me.
right, right. And I want to actually, I'm gonna go to that, right? So you mentioned early on that as a kid you had to fight a lot, which probably the anger issue, right? Is because you always felt like somebody was coming for you, so you had to kind of check the situation. Then you found wrestling, right, which kind of helped you kind of hone in that anger and
Aggression.
frustration, and you just take it out on somebody on the mat, followed by football. But you had mentioned something about during your wrestling days is also when you discovered art, and then you introduce yourself as an artist. So just kind of bringing all that to the forefront, like how much was art part of some of the shifts in your life, right? Because you started discovering wrestling alongside art. Did art stay with you throughout the process of throughout your uh, high school, college, and then until now?
Um, no, it didn't because, like, I started getting to like sketching in middle school. I'll paint at school, and then because I wanted to be socialized with friends, I let it go, and not only that too, sometimes like I'm talking from my own opinion. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
a goal of a parent is to like make sure their child um, find their gift, right?
Right.
And once the child finds their gift, they're supposed to invest in that gift. But
Mm.
sometimes when you're in survival mode or you don't have a certain education, you're not gonna really know that.
Right.
And
Right.
so and so I was always like artistic in a sense where I was like, I'll do little sketches when elementary school or do like ceramics and stuff. I was always into that, but that didn't really like pull my mom. It didn't really grab her attention, because she didn't know or whatever. Um, and so like in middle school, in high school, I transitioned to playing football. But I always loved art. I always, took pictures of certain paintings that I like or sketches or Google stuff. I always loved art, but I didn't get a chance to return to it until my business failed in 2014.
Mm.
And so, like in 2014, when my business failed, I was going through depression, and it was like a tough year. And like I was like, in that year, I thought about committing suicide.
Mm.
And so what happened was like, I had moved back home from college, and I was like working between jobs. But because my GPA wasn't up to par, bruh's looking out for me. They're gonna say, give me a job before, but my GPA dropped. I had the work ethic, you know, and I'm intelligent, but my GPA dropped, so they can't. There's certain stuff, you just can't do. So I ended up going to a career fair, and I met this guy from New York Life, but my plan was going to law school. So so I was going to start studying for the LSAT. But you say you don't need that. You don't got to go to law school to make that money. Sell insurance, and all I wanted to do honestly was to make money so I could help my mom out. Because now I'm moving back home, and
Right.
my father said he was going to help me out with my loans, but that didn't really happen.
Mm.
So I got my license, my 215 license. I was working for a Fortune 100 company, and I ended up resigning by next year because you know money was falling off the books, and the
Mm.
big business was taking too long to close. Because I'm a one year in, a young African American male. It's gonna be hard for you to hand over $500,000 to me.
Right. Right.
You just. But I knew this. I knew the material. I had the knowledge. I had the hustle. I had the style and the grace. But business failed, and so um, I had lost three cousins four cousins, but three of them died in the fire. And so when I go to the funeral, it's like three caskets. They all get buried at once. You know, um,
That's
I
a
lost.
lot to have to deal with, bruh.
Yeah, and I'm working in corporate America, and then also I'm working overnight. So I'm working my business during the day, but I'm working overnight because I need money to take care of my expenses. So I'm not really getting the right amount of sleep. So after I resigned, my little cousin, she takes her life, like in college. And it was tough on the family and stuff. It's a lot of stuff that I was going through. Like I was, in the valley for too long, and then so like I ended up getting like a new job in
Mm-hmm.
Jacksonville, where I'm at right now. The brothers reached out to me, and the brothers knew that my business had failed, and he was like, my job is hiring. They want to do interviews, so I was like, all right, bet. But I'm still like going through depression, and I ended up getting hired, but I had to wait to get the clearance and all that stuff. So I was at a temp agency where I was like, okay, I need to make some money, and wait, until I leave. And so it was there where I realized I was like, this is the end of my chapter. This is not the end of my book. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna do something I always enjoyed doing when I was a child, and that was like art and painting. And I'm gonna do something I always wanted to do as a child, and that was like martial arts. So I was like, okay, when I move to Jacksonville, things get situated, that I'm gonna start, looking for these outlets, these healthy outlets. And so when I transitioned to Jacksonville, I started working out, getting my mind back right, slowly but surely. I started doing martial arts in February. So next month, gonna make 10 years. I've been, a student of Wing Chun Kung Fu. I'm Ip Man lineage. And I'm a student, Grandmaster Anthony Arnett. So I've been doing that. And then I started picking up painting in 2015 of June of 2015. And, I never knew my life would be like this. You know what I'm saying? Because originally I wanted to go to law school. I wanted to do like, be a prosecutor for white collar crimes,
Mm.
or do investor relations because I had
Right.
a major in public relations, right? And so life has been interesting in a sense. This past decade, I've learned a lot about myself and I learned a lot about people. And through reading different books, right, and dealing with people from all walks of life, I learned that there's power in emotional intelligence. And sometimes when people act out a certain way in anger because they don't have a love of self or it's insecurity, right? And I learned a lot about being in silence. When I moved to Jacksonville, I ain't never been in a relationship longer than um, 3 months. And so eventually, I meet somebody, and me and her was together for like 4 years, but then we ended up breaking up, right? And so like 2 years, I've been single and I've been in solitude. And so originally when I got out of my relationship, I was depressed and all this and that. Me and the Don supposed to get, married and all that stuff, but it didn't happen. And I learned how to be okay with that because I learned that love was the most beautiful thing I could ever experience. And I got a chance to experience it. And so I told myself, imagine if I had killed myself, in 2014. I wouldn't have did all this shit I'm doing now. I wouldn't have been painting.
Yep.
I would never been to Haiti. You know what I'm saying? I
Yep.
would never wrote a book. I would
Mm.
never been a martial artist. I would never been. I would never did an art show in New York. I would never been to Peru, Bahamas, Jamaica. I would never have got to see my grandma again.
Mm.
I would never went to OCOP. I would never see Sweet Mickey perform in concert. I would never, see the beautiful water in the Bahamas. I would never get to see the sunset, or sunrise in Rio de Janeiro. I
Mm.
would never get to ride the the what's it called, the four wheelers in Colombia.
See,
I never got to do.
now you just flexing on us, bruh. You just
No, but no,
flexing
but
on us.
but, but let me
No,
tell you.
I'm just joking with you, bro. I'm just
Yeah.
and the reason I say that is um I want people to see the joy as you start to name those things, right? And the the theme of your life, as we've had this discussion before, just now, is a series of attempts to making life better by making healthier choices. And the healthier the choices, the better things seem to have gotten for you. And it sounds like when you were at your worst, the best thing you could have done was pick up two new healthier choices, which was going back to what made you happy as a kid. I tell everybody, find what brought you joy when you was a little boy. It, 9 times out of 10, it'll continue to bring you joy today. Number two, don't be afraid to try something new. If it wasn't for trying out martial arts in college, I would have never started my journey into martial arts today. So it sounds like, and from where you were, multiple losses back to back, in addition to a failed business, finding these healthy habits changed the trajectory of how you, one, saw yourself. And the dopest thing you said is like, if I were to take my life, I would not experience the one true thing in life, which is love. And that is super dope. You know, a lot of people aren't willing to even admit to stuff like that. And I one, thank you for being vulnerable, even sharing that. But two, it's like, that's dope, bro. Like, do you take a step back and acknowledge how far you've come, at least within 10 years, if not within the last year alone?
Yeah, it's a struggle. I'm gonna tell you, because life. One thing I learned is right. No matter how you see it, life gonna happen. No matter how you like it, life gonna happen. The world does not stop because you lose a loved one, you lose a relationship, your business failed. Like in the last 4 years, even though I have my moments and I go through stuff, I still hit the peaks in my life, right? But one thing I had to learn is not to let the external affect the internal. And so, the last 4 years, my mom lost her hearing. Right. Um, last year my father had a stroke. I thought I was gonna have to bury him. He needed a pacemaker. He said no. So now he's in this space where he's learn how to take care of himself better. And so I've been dealing with the reality that my parents are here on borrowed time, and I'm here on borrowed time. So now I have to be intentional about my time, right? And you know, things can get tough in a sense, whereas you look at the things you do not have. But once you start counting your blessings, find joy in your day, and showing gratitude, life is so beautiful. And one thing I had to learn that, when I had transitioned out of my relationship and, I had moved, I was in this apartment and I was like, damn, I'm all by myself for the first time in 4.5 years or whatever. I had this whole routine with someone else, and I don't have that anymore. And so now I have to learn how to go hit the gym, go hit the bags. I it had got to the point I had to force myself to go out. Where I said, okay, I'm gonna just go out at least once a month. I'm gonna force myself to do something at least once a month. Um, and I had to learn. I read about Miyamoto Musashi, right? The five rings and stuff, and the I think it's called something about the path of the loner, right? And I had to learn that I'm not I'm not lonely. I'm alone, but I'm not lonely. And so I'm in solitude. So then that's when I realized, okay, this is a time for me to to become my best. And that, I'm an author too. And so the book I'm currently writing right now is it's like a poetry book from the last like 10 years and the excerpts, right? So I got some excerpts and stuff, and I got some poetry. And I talk about this that God put me in this place in solitude, to be the best that I can be for myself. Therefore, I can be better for those that I love, and I could be helpful for those I don't know. Because that space that I'm in, where it's like um, I'm changing people's lives every weekend because I teach kids, right? And so what I teach these kids is emotional intelligence, and I teach them life stuff, and I teach them some brush stuff too, but they don't know that, you know.
Yeah. They'll realize it after the fact. I think
Right,
I think every teacher does it, and they don't, like, brothers know we're doing it, and it's things that they'll realize if they choose an organization. They'll be like, hold up, the teacher Sifu such and such did this, and you know what I mean. So it's super dope.
Yeah, and so now I'm like, I'm planting seeds into these children, and I just hope these children become trees that provide shade. You know what I'm saying? And each one teach one. And it's like when I speak to my students, I'm also speaking to myself. And when I tell them that success breeds confidence and confidence breeds success. And so now they understand. I say it's a mindset thing. And that's the first thing. Once I tell them that, I say you got to believe yourself. You got to have faith in yourself. It's a mindset. I don't got to yell at them because now they know it's like, oh, he's not here to bully us. He's not here to terrorize us. He's here to empower us. And so they understand that I'm affirming to them that I ask them this. I say, what are your greatest weapons? They say my mind and my heart.
Mm,
Because I used to say only my mind, and then one time I heard something and they say no, the heart is just as powerful as the mind.
yep.
And I was like, you know what? I told them this. I said, you know what, guys? I'm wrong. I'm sorry. And they was like, why
Mm,
seafood? I was telling you guys, your greatest weapon is your mind, but it's also your heart. You need your heart to pump your body. You need your heart to move. The mind tell the heart to go, but the heart tell, make the arms
everything else.
move.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And, and so now, go ahead.
No, no, I was just, just that in itself, right? I think a good sifu or good teacher ties external things into the lesson, right? Because I think we all got to realize that there there's so many ways to live life, but we all, how can I put this? We got to be willing to one, share what we've learned with others. A question I usually ask, and the reason I'm saying all this is a question I usually ask, and you kind of alluded to it, was what would you tell your younger self, especially when it comes to building healthy habits, right? But besides that, the conversation you have with your students today, would that be the same conversation you would have with your younger self, considering
Yeah,
coming up with the male figures in your life being in and out and inconsistent?
I would tell my younger self, just like I tell my students, discipline equals freedom.
Mm,
When I look back in my life and I had those mishaps or whatever, it's because I like discipline or because I like focus. That's all it really be. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm an artist, right? When I started painting, I said, "Oh, I'm just painting because it's therapeutic. Nobody's supposed to know that I'm painting, right?" And then my homeboy, my LB was like, "Nah, man, you should share. You never know who you inspiring, and plus you might be able to sell them." I was like, "Oh, I'm not trying to make no money with this. I'm just trying to this paint. I want to keep to myself. I need something therapeutic because the whole mental health thing back in the day, in 2014, it wasn't a thing for black men.
yeah. Not just let's take it
I
even
mean, it
further back.
was.
You're talking about in the Haitian household, say job ki sou, say ou gon ki fon bagay, like you know it was always somebody else's fault for the way you were, and mental health was the last thing that anybody in the Haitian household would even talk about. And then you tackle the American culture. What mental health within what last was it 2005? We're in 25 now. Maybe the last, I don't even want to say 8 years, is when it's became a thing of, oh, let's talk about mental health. You know what I mean? Like I know when I started therapy in 2015. And for me it was trying to find myself, bro. Like, you know how hard, like, you know how hard it is to kind of like try to figure things out and there's nobody around to give you answers. You know what I mean? Um, you can't go to your mom because she's gonna, like, every Haitian mom or dad is a new evangelist right now. they've all found God, and their answer is just pray, and then it'll fix itself, right? Meanwhile, they was in the club back in the day, party at the crib every single day, but now all of a sudden, I'm not knocking it because I think the um newfound faith that they've have has kept them around. Similar to your parents, my dad both has both vision and hearing loss and heart condition, and so I definitely understand where you're coming from, bro. Because um, I had to. I'm the baby, right? So I'm the baby amongst multiple children, and it got to the point where there was like, yo, your dad can't keep going to Haiti. He has to stay with you. He can't do the things he used to do. You have to stop him. And it's like having the baby tell his father, "Yo, I'm gonna take your passport. You gotta stay with me. You gotta listen to me. You gotta eat what I tell you to eat. You gotta go to these doctor's appointments. Yo, that stuff is tough.
Yeah, man.
Um,
Oh,
and
it beats you
oh,
up.
and it's one, oh, so papa mkunya, like you the father now. I'm like, you will forever be the father. It's just I've been, and I bring all this back to say it's like, these we weren't given the tools to deal with the trials and tribulation life brings. Our parents did the best that they could, but they kept it to themselves, right? Si gen manje, sou bezon manje, si bezon l'argent, sou bezon ba sayo, it's head down work and by all means necessary. I'm gonna stress out, but I'm gonna not let my kids know I'm stressing out. I got heart condition. I'm gonna hide that from my kid. I can't see, but I'm gonna act like I can still see, and then run into stuff because I'm too embarrassed. I think and this all ties into the concept of mental health is like we have a there is a shame in our community and especially the Haitian community as our adults become older. They feel as though that one, um they shouldn't be putting the quote unquote burden on their children, right? But as the evangelists, they want to remind us every set, honor thy mother and thy father every 5 seconds they get, right? But that also includes taking care of you. That also includes taking you to the hospital. That also telling you you can't eat fried chicken every day. That also tell you know what I mean, Ma, you can't be in a house by yourself anymore. Um, these are things that as children, especially first generation, you'll have people like they'll say, "Oh, upako upon gamun haïtien." I don't have to know gamun haïtien to understand. Like, my dad may not say he's depressed, but you can't tell me his loss of vision and the hearing hasn't had an impact on his life.
And that's something that I saw in my father when he was in the hospital, and I was like, "Yo, what's good?" I'm like, "What's wrong?" And he said and the first thing he told me was like, "I need money." I'm
Mm.
like, "You in the you just had a stroke. You in the hospital? Like you 76.
Mm-hmm.
What do you need money for? You got kids that we don't know about?"
That's the first question you gotta ask.
you know. And but then I can understand him being a man, him having the ability to go to Haiti when he wants to. You know, it. I understand because I travel,
Mm-hmm.
so I know what traveling does for him because I know what it does for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? But also too, you gotta take accountability for your actions.
Yep. Yep.
You failed the plan,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all that is.
Just kind of bringing back the topic, like poor habits lead to
Yep,
not just
there you go.
lead to not just physical, leads to mental strains, lead to physical strains, lead to things like, you know and I will say my dad's condition is more, some of his conditions are genetic. And this is why it's important, and I'll just do this PSA. Family, and I'm talking to my Haitian Zoes, my West Indian Zoes, my not Zoes, my West Indian family. Please, please get that family history together. You need to know who has diabetes, who has glaucoma, who has cataracts, uh, who has had a cancer scare in the past X number of years, who died of cancer, who had lymphoma. Like, we are so afraid of telling people what we have gone through, what we have experienced, that we don't realize. And when I say we as a diaspora don't realize that we're setting up our children, our nieces and nephews for failure, because when they go into these doctors' offices and they ask, do you have a history of X, Y, and Z? The automatic answer is no, because they don't know and that information is never shared. So I want to say, please don't hesitate. You know, sit your kids down, of course, reasonable age, and have the conversation with them, because once you send them out into the world, the likelihood of them calling back home like, hey mom, did we have this, or hey mom, is this in our family, is going to start to increase, because one, healthcare ain't cheap, and knowing some of these things ahead of time will make sure that we can make some of the better choices for ourselves. Because of my dad's condition and my mom's condition, there are times where I'm like, I could eat another piece of chicken, but I'm gonna avoid it, or I might need to drink some water, or I might need to exercise some more. I think their bad habits, and one of which is not telling people what's going on, what has gone on, or what the history of what some of our medical histories are, kind of put us, the next generation, at risk, because especially during the pandemic, like during the pandemic, I had to do my best to keep my dad as alive as possible, because he had all the pre-existing conditions, right? So, like you, a traveler, mbakite them like I msoti. Yo, as soon as they said we could travel, I was out. But one of the things that I always made sure was, one, I got a COVID test before I go home. Got home. If my wife now, we would travel, I would just stay with her for a week, just to make sure everything was good. Nobody came in the house that wasn't vetted. Like, I was doing all the things just because I know, like, you know, what's going on. Plus, I had to do a complete medical workup on my dad. When I tell you I started taking care of my dad in 2018. I had zero medical history. I'm talking about, we had to go to cardiologist after cardiologist after cardiologist. We had to go to vision specialists. We had to go to ENT. Um, these are things that they don't do for themselves, but because simba malad mbapal kal doctor.
Right,
And cataracts and glaucoma is a thing that gradually come on you until you start to feel like there's something in my eye, or you start to
right.
realize your vision is going. And then on top of that, my dad's hearing is due to strokes that he had. His hearing loss is due to strokes. So it's a lot, bro. And I think our family and our community don't realize that to take care of another person, or to take care of a loved one, there's a lot that weighs on our mental health. And we can't say mental health is not a thing. You know what I mean? Because when somebody in Haiti passes, the first thing we want to do is drop on the ground, do all this money, like do all this stuff, and we don't realize, like, yo, that's you going into a depressive state. You know what I mean? Like, we have to use the terms as it makes sense, but just to
But
kind of bring this back to full circle, I like the idea that, one, these things have been therapeutic for you. Doing your martial arts, doing your art, writing your book, and then of course, what you would have said to your younger self, which is, find discipline, find structure, because I think,
yeah, and give
especially,
yourself another chance too.
there you go, there you go.
Give. That's the thing that I remember when I was working at this Fortune 100 company, and one of these sales guys were like, "Oh, you know, I hire myself in the morning, I fire myself at night."
Hmm.
So it's like every morning he hired himself, right? And it was just like, giving yourself another chance. Just, like what happened yesterday is gone. And that's something that I had issues with.
Hmm.
Not learning how to let things go, dwelling on things for too long.
Yeah, you got to give yourself grace, bro. Let's get because if you don't give yourself grace, everything you feel like you failed at will just compound and then just weigh on you to the point where
Exactly.
it'll feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulder when it really isn't. You know, we have to look at how can we be better tomorrow than we were today.
Correct.
So, with that being said, thank you, my brother. This was I one number one. I appreciate you opening up your heart and your life to us, because there's somebody that's gone through what you've gone through, can hear your story and be like, you know what? If he can make it out, I can make it out. If he can make it through, I can make it through. Because
Yeah.
when it gets so dark that you are considering taking your life and you realize something has to change, I tell everybody the point in which you make changes in your life or seek therapy is when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired and you realize the change needs to happen. And that's what we're about. We're about get my cheese back on my cracker is about removing the stigma around mental health, right? It's not bad to ask for help. Men, specifically men, do not suffer in silence. We don't have to be the victims of our own lives because if you continue to
I,
go down the route, go ahead, go ahead.
like one thing I had to learn, I'm gonna tell you like this. My father had a stroke in September, and then he couldn't talk, he couldn't walk. They had to, clean him and all that stuff, and then he was able to like recover. And he calls me from the hospital, and I answer the phone because he couldn't talk, so now he talking, and he says, "I want to paint again." I say, "Huh? What'd you say?" He's like, "I want to paint again," and I was like, "Oh, okay. Um, let's work on you recovering, and then when you good, we'll figure that part out." And so I'm gonna talk to you. I'm gonna call. I'm gonna check on you later. So I hang up, and it messed me up because I'm sitting here thinking like, dang, I haven't been painting, and I'm like, I'll be a fool. I don't want to wake up one day in the hospital bed say, "Damn, I wish I had painted."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so it was at that moment I realized I was like, look, I may go through things. I may reach the peaks. I may reach the valleys. Life is going to happen, and it's okay. I must keep going on. I must remember the mission. I must remember the goal. My father, my mother, and I myself, we all are here on borrowed time. So it's in my best interest to be my best self while I still have the life and the gift and the breath. Life is going to happen. I must focus on the things I can't control. Those external things, I may be concerned, but I cannot care too much. I start to get back to painting. I start to understand, okay, yeah, it's quiet. I'm in solitude because I have a purpose, and I must align back with with my gift. And that's when I realized I was like, like I was trying to date again and stuff like that, and I was like, man, I'm wasting my time because these people didn't align with my values and my beliefs.
Right.
So now I was like, I'd rather just pour that more into my gifts. And I was like, whoever my person gonna be gonna catch me while I'm on my mission. Because right now the most important thing is like my to be my best self. Because if love is what inspires me, it should be love I should live and thrive on. And so what I love, I love my parents, I love martial arts, and I love art, and I love investing.
Yeah.
So so those are the things that I'm giving my time to.
And I mean, I think that's the best place to stop right here, bruh. I want to say thank you so much. I appreciate you giving me the time, being vulnerable, opening up about yourself. As I said earlier, I hope someone can kind of take from your story some lessons of how to live life, you know. And with that being said, this is another dope interview with another dope guest. And I want to say, brothers, if you have a topic, or sisters, if you have a topic you want to hear the brothers talking about, please leave a comment. Hit us up on Cheese on My Cracker on all streaming platforms. And with that being said, y'all have a good one. Peace.
Peace.